Bob was a wonderfully caring man at home, office, and within the community. His family, associates, friends always came first. His leadership, insight, and energy will be missed. Bob's capacity with problems and opportunities was extraordinary, as was his foresight and proactive thinking. Bob, family, friends, you will be missed.
Sherry, Courtney, Carter, Hallie, Eric Furta here. I'm really sad that I'm sitting here on Penn's campus needing to film a message for you. Your dad, Bob, is just an incredible human being, the values that he has as a business person, but I think even more importantly as a husband and a father. He's touched all of us in so many ways, and I know through this collection of videos and other written notes that you're going to get a broader perspective on how many lives he has touched. Courtney, it was over 20 years ago in 1996 that in Glenbard South High School you and I met. I remember it around Halloween, and I saw this young man come in who was interacting almost effortlessly with a range of students, a whole group of students that were coming to hear me talk about Columbia. Sure, a few of you were just trying to get out of class. You were probably in that group too, but you never know what type of circumstances arise where an interaction takes place and it may change the course of your life. And I know for your dad, for your husband, Sherry, for Bob, what he was about when he was thinking about your educational path, he always loved recounting that story that you, Courtney, shared with him, saying that you met the head of admissions at Columbia during the visit, the high school visit, and he didn't believe you. And you all finished dinner, and then you went upstairs to do your homework, and your dad went up and said, you probably met someone from Columbia, but it wasn't the head of admissions. And you proudly took out the card that had my name on it, and that was the beginning of a long relationship that I've had with your family that I cherish and will continue to cherish. So your dad wrote to me a year ago. It was actually March 3rd, 2016. He wrote to me just recounting that story and how proud he is of all of you and the experiences that you've had together as a family through Columbia being a bond. And I know that that bond will continue. Your dad's memories will always be there. And on this day, I just want us all to remember the greatness that your dad exhibited through work and as a family, and that we're going to make sure that everything that we learned from him through his values and the type of person that he is, that we will continue to uphold those values. I'm sad for your loss. We all feel that loss, and we're here to support you. I love you all. Thank you.
I'm Fred Langenberg, the former chairman and chief executive of the Interlake Corporation, and I'm very happy and proud to have this opportunity to say a few words about Bob Reum. I recruited Bob to come to Chicago in the years approximately 1978-79 to become the chief financial officer of the corporation. And in that responsibility, he did a wonderful job in simplifying the reporting and making it really understandable to the people that were operating the facilities and operating the divisions of the company at that time. He continued in that function and assumed increasing operating responsibilities in the plants. And it was through that combination of his financial abilities and skills and operating abilities that he was appointed my successor as President, Chief Operating Officer, and Chairman of the Interlake Corporation. Bob handled the breakup of Interlake due to a hostile takeover, and we had to assume a lot of debt, which caused us to break up the company into several components. And it was Bob who brought in GKN and negotiated the final sale of the company to the English Corporation. Let me talk just briefly about what I consider to be Bob's key skills. He managed with analytical and strategic abilities. That goes without saying. But more than that, Bob managed with a certain fairness and attention to the personal situations that existed with his subordinates. Bob was fair, Bob was firm, and he managed with a style that will not be forgotten by anyone who was associated with him. Thank you again for this opportunity.
I'm Steve Smith, a lucky guy who got to work for Bob Reum twice over 26 years, first at Interlake and then during an incredible journey here at Amstead. The thing I always appreciated most about Bob is that he didn't care at all about all the pomp and circumstance of being a CEO. All he cared about was making anything he touched better, be it businesses, organizations, or people. Bob was a great boss. He set high standards, but as long as you were doing your job, he let you do your job. It was a privilege to work for him. The thing I'll miss most about Bob, though, really, is sitting in the office late in the evening and talking about everything, be it politics, sports, business, the company. And there's one debate I regret we never got to finish. That is, should the Bears have re-signed Jay Cutler several years ago? Bob, I still think I was right on that one. Bob, I'll miss you as a boss and as a friend.
What a sad time to acknowledge the loss of Bob, an incredibly kind, fun, and generous brother-in-law. We've had so many fun family celebrations together, Thanksgivings in Chicago and Traverse, Christmases, July 4ths on the Bay. Our kids have grown up together, looking forward to visits with the Reum team. Beyond our many family celebrations, my fondest memories of Bob involve his enthusiasm in sharing the things that he loved and enjoyed with all of us. For example, the Bulls games that we and our children were invited to attend during the Michael Jordan era, including the night the boys and girls dyed their hair Chicago Bulls red, and the three-peat, which we were all privileged to witness in seats on the floor of the Bulls Stadium. Bob loved Africa and made sure that we had the chance to enjoy it as he did. It was the trip of a lifetime. We saw South Africa's Big Five and so much more. Bob was nicknamed Babu and Jimbo after that trip. Silly but so fun, and the nickname stuck. He loved the opera and symphony and shared his love with Jim and me over the years. We traveled to Rolling Rock with Bob and Sherry, where we had fun on the golf course and the shooting range. Of course, we were also introduced to Chippewa soup, Stanley steamers, and the endless seafood buffet. And what fun we had over the years eating out at Sherry and Bob's favorite and special Chicago restaurants. The highlight, though, was Hallie and Oliver's wedding in October. All the family was there and dressed in their finest. So excited to share such a beautiful and fun occasion. Bob was so handsome and proud, just the way a husband and dad should be and should be remembered. We'll miss you so much, Bob.
Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I've had the pleasure of knowing the Reum team for over the past 30 years. And although being here at this time is a shocker probably to all of us, I do have three quick things that I think about when I think of Bob. The first is he was an encourager, and by that I mean we were driving somewhere together and he asked me what I wanted to do when I got older, and I told him, oh, I don't know, maybe be an administrative assistant, and he said there was nothing wrong with that job and it's an important job and we need people to do it, but I see you doing so much more than that. And I remember looking at him like, who are you looking at? But you know what? I look in the mirror now and I see it too, Bob. I just wish I had a chance to tell you that. He was also very selfless. He would work very long days, 12 hours most times, and call on the way home and ask how my classes went, and I would tell him I was having problems in economics, and he's like, well, if you cook dinner for me, I will say goodnight to the kids and then come down and work with you. And he would spend another hour helping me with my econ class. And between you and me, I really think if Bob wrote the econ textbooks, everybody would pass. That's just me. Lastly, when I think of Bob, I think of him as an educator. I remember Sherry and Bob are teaching me how to use the words good, well, and fine. And he called home one day and said, Jennifer, how are you? I said, I'm doing good, Bob. How are you? And there's this long pause. Hi, Jennifer. How are you? And I kind of looked at the phone thinking, did I not just answer this? I'm doing good, Bob. How are you? A longer pause. So, Jennifer, how are you doing? And I really thought, well, maybe we had a bad connection or something. I don't know. And I just remember thinking, I am doing good. Well, Bob, I am doing very well, thank you. How are you? And he said, I'm doing very fine. Thank you very much. And the other thing is Haagen-Dazs ice cream. I just thought of this. I got introduced to Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and every time I look at a pint, I'm going to think of him. And I am just so blessed to have had him in my life for the time that I've had him. And I just thank you guys for letting me be a part of his celebration. Love you.
As a lawyer, I've had the good fortune of representing Bob for over 20 years. When Bob was the CEO of Interlake, we worked together on a very long list of transactions. We did so many, in fact, I often thought when I retired I could write a book about all of them, and it would cover all kinds of transactions done by American corporations in the 20th century, 21st century. We did leveraged recapitalizations, we fought hostile takeover attempts, we did mergers, we bought and sold businesses, we did a very wide variety of financing, and we eventually sold the company. One of the most difficult and challenging transactions Bob and I worked on was the spin-off of the iron and steel business. This took many months, really more than 2 years, and Bob and I met and worked on this almost weekly over that time. This was a very difficult transaction, but it gave me a chance to see what a serious, dedicated, hardworking, and interested corporate executive Bob was, and what a wonderful client he was. But it also presented a lot of together time with a client. Not too long thereafter, my wife and I took an African safari trip to Botswana. The first stop on our trip was a safari camp way out in the boonies somewhere. I think we took a little 2-seat airplane to get there. It accommodated at most 15 people. Anyway, we arrived, it was about lunchtime. We were all dusty and dirty from the trip, but we said, let's go down and get some lunch in the little lunch tent. So we walked over there, we walked into the tent, and you can't imagine the first face that I saw. It was Bob Reum, who was there with his daughter. I guess what that proves is sometimes it is virtually impossible to get away from a good client. It also, though, showed me what an interesting and interested guy Bob was, to be out in the middle of Botswana learning more about Africa. I'm sure we'll all miss Bob, but I at least will always remember him as one of my dearest clients, even if he did follow me all the way to darkest Africa. Godspeed, Bob.
I remember back in high school playing on the school soccer team with Carter and Courtney, and it didn't matter if we had a game at home in Glen Ellen, Illinois, or if we were in the middle of nowhere, prairie land, 2 hours in the outside of nothing, Illinois, playing against some small town. Mr. Reum somehow always made it to the game. And I remember before the game would start, he'd have his newspaper open, he'd be reading through the newspaper, and as soon as the game stopped, he'd close his newspaper, put it down, and be so focused on the game. And I thought at the time, I was like, wow, someone like Mr. Reum, who has so many amazing things going on in his life and so many successes and accomplishments, still figured out a way to show up and watch us lose.
Hello, Bob's family and friends. My name is Linda Ginzel. I'm a professor at the University of Chicago at the Booth School of Business. And for over a decade, I had the extreme privilege of working with Bob, always together with Shirley, designing education on behalf of all the good folks at Amstead. Bob's passion and mine happens to be developing people. And I design a lot of custom I work with a lot of CEOs, and I loved working with Bob. He never wanted broad brush, quick fixes and simple solutions. He always pushed me to go deeper. He challenged me to connect his people with core notions, fundamentals that really matter.
Hello, this is Don Fetzer from BAC. I wanted to share a funny story and then a personal thing I learned from Bob about leadership. About 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to do a business review with Bob in Europe when I was named president of Europe. He and Sherry were heading on to a safari in Africa, and I was meeting them afterwards in South Africa. Bob had a challenge. He had 2 extra pieces of luggage that he couldn't take with him on the safari, and I volunteered to take those 2 pieces to South Africa. Unfortunately, I was not counting on the fact that a customs officer was going to stop me and proceed to ask me whose suitcases were they, what was in the suitcases, and then proceeded to then go through the suitcases. I was a bit embarrassed, obviously, as I did not know, and I got through it. And Bob and I had a good laugh about it when we got back to the hotel. The thing I learned from Bob, though, was his visits to South Africa, a relatively small business for BAC and for Amstead. He took the same amount of time reviewing the strategy, the people, that he did for larger businesses. That drove a lot of results for the company. It was an incredible learning experience for me. And on behalf of BAC and all the employees, our thoughts go out to the Reum family.
My name is Brad Anderson, and I served on the Board of Waste Management from 2009 till Bob's passing recently. Bob did a spectacular job as chairman and is going to have a lasting impact on waste management. But my biggest memory of Bob is when most of us probably would have flunked when a very, very difficult sort of personal challenge emerged to him. And instead of taking it personal, he looked at the interest of the company, the long-term interest, passed completely through it, and did one of the most selfless and brilliant jobs of leadership I've ever seen.
Okay, Bob, I miss you so much and love you so much. And I think of you always on the violin. Keep it up. Please think of me and keep up your violin, and I will hear you someday. Lots of love to you.
My favorite memory of Bob was when Sherry brought Bob home when she was in college to meet our parents. We're a family of early risers. 9 o'clock, Bob was still sleeping. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. He didn't wake up until noon. We were all thinking, who is this boyfriend that Sherry brought home? We laugh now at family reunions when we tell this story because Bob has always worked so hard that was probably the only time he ever slept in.
Bob, I just want you to know how much I miss you. I first met you when I was 17 and I was a freshman at Michigan State, and Sherry needed a ride to Traverse City but needed transportation from Ann Arbor. You had just started dating Sherry, and I watched you walk through the hall when you brought her to East Lansing, and I was immediately impressed. You had that Eastern Ivy League look, and you seemed so friendly. Over the years, you and I have had so many great conversations, and I recall driving up from Detroit, and we would talk for 6 hours nonstop, and really appreciated each one's thought. Over the years, you've been so generous, going to Africa, all the Bulls games, but more than that, you were generous with your time. You were someone I always knew I could count on, I could call up and talk to, and I could get a great opinion and a very thoughtful opinion, period. I remember all of our great tennis matches. They were so competitive, and as I remember, I think I always won, but you may disagree with that. Also, I remember the time when we spent the Christmas trying to find frozen pipes 6 feet under the ground, and for 5 days in a row, you and I would get up at 8 in the morning and work till dusk, and we were digging over our heads. I'm not sure we ever found those pipes, but it was sure interesting times. I always cherish our great friendship, and I want you to know you were the best brother-in-law that anybody ever could have, and I miss you dearly.
I'd like to think I was among the most beloved Egyptians in Mr. Reum's life. He did, after all, give his blessings to the boys to spend their summer in Cairo with me. And although there were some pretty close calls, much to do with Courtney's insatiable appetite, I did arguably bring them back in one piece, perhaps a story for another day. You don't have to look very far to understand how gracious and caring Mr. Reum was. You just needed to see the world through the eyes and actions of his family. The Reums functioned as a unit, an enviable unit, led by one hell of a man who got me my first meaningful finance internship, a man who opened his home and his heart to me whenever I visited Chicago, on every school visit to Columbia, or come to think of it, whenever our paths crossed. A man who gave me direct and unadulterated career advice when I got lazy or tried to shirk my responsibilities, as a young immature college freshman who, like most, may have had an inappropriate sense of entitlement. Mr. Reum was always happy to massage a message, but when you needed it the most and he thought it warranted, was more than happy to give you a swift kick in the rear end. I'm obviously speaking from experience. He took a direct vested interest and made an investment in the lives of his children, who have now become family, and those closest to them. And for a man of that stature to do so was both reflective of who he was as an individual and incredibly humbling. He was one person I never ever wanted to disappoint, and hoped one day to impress and make very proud. He was a true model of success in every sense of the word, as a father to his sons and daughter, a husband to his loving wife, a caretaker to his children's friends, a change maker and innovator in the world of business, and an inspiration to all those around him. I often find myself asking, what would Mr. Reum think of me now? Would he be convinced of my accomplishments? I really did look forward to the day when I could lean in and assert, see where that first internship has gotten me now? Your investment was not in vain. I guess I'll keep asking the question, and he can continue to look down over me. I was and will continue to be determined to show him my appreciation by continuing to grow as a person and a professional, making him one of the greatest positive influences in my life. Sherry, Courtney, Carter, and Hallie, I love you guys very much and can assure you that the spirit, the character, and the memory of your father lives on. And Mr. Reum, thank you for being a part of my life, and sorry for being late to my Northern Trust interview.
Hi, I'm Eric Fearwald, and I'm sending you this from Basel, Switzerland. I met Bob Reum about 8 years ago at the Chicago Executives Club board. From the moment I met Bob, I knew he was a special leader. Wonderful person, fun to be around, very intelligent, and a great business leader. Fortunately, after I got to know Bob, he invited me to join the Amstead board, and I was incredibly impressed by what he did leading that company. He took that company from almost bankrupt to being one of the great industrial companies in the United States and a global player. And I learned a lot from that and really enjoyed it and was really grateful to get to know Bob. And not only is he a great business leader, he's a great family man and a great philanthropist. He really helps in important causes. One of the really interesting examples of when I got to know him and had a big impact on me was we were visiting the Amstead facility at Granite City in Illinois near St. Louis. We learned about the Value for the Person initiative, and it was incredible to see this activity that Bob had sponsored, where they were working with the union people at that very difficult to operate plant. Real tough guys who were just gushing about this program and how focusing on the value of the person, everybody in that plant, had changed their lives, not only at work, but at home. How it had made them better people and how it made them more committed to Amstead and to the goals of the company. It was really touching to see that and touching to see how Bob had sponsored it, been actively engaged in it, and had let it thrive at Amstead. I was so impressed with it, I took it to our company and it had a similar, very big impact there. And by the way, Bob had supported the Amstead leadership to come to our company and to help make it happen there. So I was very grateful for that. So I just can't say enough about how much this wonderful man influenced my thinking about leadership and my appreciation for what he did at Amstead and what he did in other areas. A wonderful man, and I just want to pay a great tribute to him and wish him in heaven and his family on earth all the best.
My favorite memory of Bob, easy. Hallie and Oliver's beautiful wedding in Palm Springs. I was so aware of Bob's pride and love for Hallie. He beamed and she glowed with happiness, whether taking family photos or seated across from me at dinner. The joy was obvious, and everyone at the wedding was aware of this special father-daughter bond they shared. To Stephen and my delight, from the first moment we met Bob, he welcomed Oliver into his unique circle of family love. I am so pleased to have met, known, and seen how special a man Bob was, and I am so happy that my memories of him are filled with warmth and admiration.
Kids, my name's Don Valentine. I'm Bob's cousin. I had very few memories through much of Bob's life, but as kids, when we got together, I remember times at Kittyland, Riverview, Chicago. I don't know if they're still there. Bob was always a happy kid, and I enjoyed his company. The one memory I have of him playing the violin one time at his home was that he was very, very serious. I'd never seen him that way before, and didn't know he could be. At that time, he was just going to be about 12 or 13, I guess, and we didn't interconnect, for many years after that. But he and Sherry have been generous to the family. My mom and her Christmas cookies, I always put in a big order. We appreciate that. On the entire Valentine family, we hope you proceed here with fond memories of Bob. He was a good guy and was always gracious. He'll be missed. Bye-bye.
As a CEO, Bob viewed his main job as developing a talented management team over a sustained period of time. To him, this was absolutely core and central to the execution of business strategy and building Amstead to be a great company. As a board member, I saw Bob give his energy, commitment, and inspiration to his team. He never confused activity with results. He set the bar high and held people accountable, always pushing them to come up with innovative strategies. He deeply believed that competitive advantage is driven off of people, their thoughts, their ideas, their innovation. Bob made many people wealthy at Amstead, but I believe his mark on the human dimension has been far greater. He will be sorely missed.
Bob was a great friend and a valued colleague for many years. He truly was a confidant and a continuous mentor for me. I learned over my time with him that he was truly a master of strategy. At some point, Bob decided that I could be a good addition to the Amstead board. I had some concerns and objections, but he had a plan. I said, "Too much work." His response to me, "Don't worry, this is a private board. It won't be so intense." I then said, "What about meeting dates? I might have a conflict." He said, "Don't worry about it. We can always change the dates." And finally I said, "I'm just not sure." And his response, "Listen, your daughter lives and works here in Chicago. We never have a board dinner the night before a meeting. Come and have dinner with your daughter every time you come to Chicago. Objections removed, positive inducement provided, a well-executed plan." That truly was Bob Reum.
My name is Bill Mueller. Bob was a Yale 64 classmate whom I did not know. He played basketball and I played the oboe. We met at Interlake in the late 1970s when I first moved to Chicago and was with Citibank. Bob's business skills and leadership were superbly applied at Amstead. In a period of liquidity crisis, Bob moved from Amstead director to chairman and CEO, and was an outstanding crisis and turnaround manager with a steady hand on the tiller. He turned the company into a world-class growth machine. He required managers to develop and execute challenging line of business strategies supported by detailed operational plans that resulted in sustainable high operating margins and returns on invested capital. He was highly visible and passionate with employees about the Amstead ESOP as a valuable retirement program. Bob had a sense of humor. When Bob and Sherry were my wife Kitty's and my guests at a recent annual fundraising event for the Chicago Botanic Garden, Bob said, "We really came to check out the competition of the Morton Arboretum." And then there was the annual strategic planning meeting at Rolling Rock, for which Bob had several favorite things. With senior management and the board, there were 2 days of intensive strategy meetings. After breakfast, jacket required, the attendees would descend into a lower-level cave-like conference room with window wells, inadequate Wi-Fi, and a thermostat that did not work well. 9 holes of golf might be played, but only if there was not the usual round of June thunderstorms. Rum-raising ice cream at lunch and perhaps dinner. And finally, Bob's favorite thing was having Sherry arrive for the weekend when the management and board finally left town. I will always cherish having Bob as a very good friend and for having the privilege of being a director and colleague on his Amstead board.
One of my favorite memories of Bob is when we'd get together for lunch or dinner, and he'd always tell the story often about when he was dating Sherry, and I was probably about 4 or 5 years old, and he came up to Traverse City to see Sherry so much that I thought he was my brother. And then when I would see him kissing, I'd run up to him and say, "Kissy wissy." And Bob probably told that story many times when we got together. And every time I walk into Elnora's house, and I walk through now the living room and the kitchen, I always think of Bob and when I would see Sherry and Bob kissing. In regards to what I appreciate about Bob the most, many things, of course, for all of us. But in the beginning, both Sherry and Bob emphasized family and getting together despite living in many different areas. And Bob made sure that we all got together either in Chicago or in Wayne, initially at Thanksgiving. And because of that, all the cousins got to know each other very well and are all good friends and close relationships. And so it was so important, emphasizing family. And then Bob always made sure that everybody made the effort to come up to Traverse City to visit us so we could see everybody, and always emphasized the importance of family. I'll always greatly appreciate that. And of course, there were so many good memories, and I'm focusing on all the great times that I had with Bob, and that I was honored to be part of his life and to be able to share so many fun experiences with him. Thank you.
I know one of the things that I really appreciated about Bob was that he always put other people kind of before himself. So he always put like other people's happiness too. So one thing and a few memories I have were like when we would go to the Wayne house for Thanksgiving. I mean, he always just opened up his house to everybody, and I think we all always had a blast there. Going to Rolling Rock, which I'm sure, I had an absolutely amazing time there, and that couldn't have been easy to do, bringing I think like 20 other people there, like more than he normally goes with. But those are just like kind of small examples that I realized that he always put other people before himself, and he would always put in the effort just to make it so that, like, especially our entire family could get together. And I think we all have some amazing memories from that. And then one other thing that kind of goes off that is that in the past couple of years, I kind of realized that whatever he said he was going to do, he always like 100% invested his time in that and focused on that. So like, I know he always had probably hundreds of emails and voicemails and like phone calls that he could answer. But whenever we had like a family event or if he says he's just going to do something, like have like lunch with me when I was visiting Chicago, his phone would be in his pocket, and he was always 100% present and very like interested in whatever he was doing at that time. And I think that's one thing that I really learned from him, and I really appreciated. I think just all the memories that we have and all the experiences that we've all shared with Bob, like absolutely 100% makes us better people just because we've got to spend that time with him and with such an amazing person. I know he's going to be missed very much. We all love you, Bob.
Hey Bob, it's Maggie. I just wanted to say how much I love you and miss you, and how I just cherish all the moments that we had together. One that really sticks out to me is when you came to Miami and we walked around our campus and you took all of our friends out to dinner, and it was just such a special moment that I got to spend with you, and how much I enjoyed your advice and support throughout that. And then also the time I spent in Portland and everything you gave to me, and just talking to me about my career and just as I was growing up. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it and how much I love you and miss you, and all your kids have done for me. You're just truly such an amazing person, and I'm so blessed to know you. Love you, miss you lots.
Hi Bob, you were always the most welcoming person. Thank you for always letting my family stay in 24F. We always had the best times in Chicago. You always included the extended family with everything. No one will ever forget Rolling Rock. One of the last memories I had of you was when all the cousins decided to do the polar plunge. When you and Sherry came and watched. It was so much fun. You will be missed so much, but we'll always remember you.
Jane Phillips Donaldson here. I'm so sorry I can't join you all next weekend in person for the tribute to Bob's life, but I'm delighted to have an opportunity to say a few words in tribute. Bob and Jim and my brother Jeff and I all grew up in Oak Park, Illinois in the late 40s, early 50s. Our parents were very good friends, and in fact, Walter Reum was my father's lawyer. So what I remember vividly, surprisingly, after all these years, is spending time over at the Reum's house on Ridgeland Avenue, stuffing envelopes for probably one of Walter's campaigns. It might have been one of Lucy's, but I think it was probably earlier than that. And Bob was in charge, and Jeff, my brother, and Jim and I were the worker bees. So I will always give thanks to Bob for teaching me how to properly stuff envelopes. And it turned out to be very handy many years later, as my former husband was a member of the United States Congress, and we went through many campaigns. So I was a great envelope stuffer to begin with, needless to say. After the shock of hearing of Bob's death, because I had been sort of following his professional life, much closer probably to Jim and his family over time, but I took the opportunity to take a look at and see what Bob's family had been doing, and was just amazed at what Carter and Courtney and Hallie, the amazing exploits that you all have been involved in. And Sherry, you must be so proud of them all, and see Bob in virtually everything that they do. So my very best to all of the Reum family, and I know you will carry on in Bob's spirit.
There are so many things to love about Bob, but above all, I'll always remember Bob's kindness and thoughtfulness. My favorite recent memory is from last year. I was visiting Chicago for work, and he invited me to come tour the office and have lunch. Walking through the main floor and listening to him tell the story of his company and all the people that have made it a success over the years, I could just tell how much he cared about the people he worked with and how proud he was of all they'd accomplished. We had a wonderful conversation after lunch. Over lunch, after the office tour, we talked about the world, about politics, the environment, Chicago, and the future. And we didn't always agree on everything, but I always knew that I could count on Bob to listen, process an idea, and share his honest thoughts. I love you, Bob, and I miss you so much.
I'm Jim Trevathan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Waste Management. I've had the privilege of knowing Bob for about 13 years, since his first meeting with us as a new director. Bob and all directors hold a special place in the eyes of executives for a public company. We treat them with the respect they deserve. We enjoy their advice, their guidance, their counsel, but we also talk about them a little bit behind the scenes. Bob had a special characteristic that we learned fairly early in his tenure as a director and then later as our chairman. Bob dressed with very bright colors. We used to bet on what kind of color combination Bob would bring to a casual dinner after an all-day board of directors meeting. And Bob would always confuse us and surprise us with the color combinations. He wore bright colors very proudly. He did a great job, whoever helped him, with his clothing choice. And we used to have fun trying to decide what's next for Bob at the next directors meeting. We truly enjoyed his company. We enjoyed the time with him as our chairman and as a director, and we'll miss Bob's guidance and counsel.
Hi, my name is Jim Fish. I'm CEO of Waste Management, and I'm here today to reflect back on the 5 years that I knew Bob as chairman, as a mentor, as a friend, and as a golfing buddy. So first I thought I would talk a little bit about my time with Bob. I met Bob in 2011, and Bob was chairman at the time. Bob acted as really the chief strategist on the board, and boy, if he knew anything, he knew strategy. Was always the guy that asked very in-depth questions of us as senior leaders, and was always pushing us to make sure that it was not just strategy, that it was execution as well. So he was hugely valuable to the corporation. Secondly, Bob was a mentor to me. Bob mentored me in my CFO role as I progressed towards CEO. We probably talked once every 2 weeks. Bob would give me advice about previous meetings. He would give me counsel about things to focus on. He really was a mentor to me. And I really can say that he was my primary mentor in the last 5 years as I moved from CFO to CEO. Bob was obviously a friend of all of ours and a friend of mine, and I'll tell one last funny story about Bob. As a golf buddy and a hyper competitor, several of us played at his club in Chicago, at Chicago Golf Club, and we were on a hole that required a little bit of a shot over water, about 190 or 200 yard shot, pretty long shot, and it was kind of like Tin Cup, where Bob hit the first one in the water, and boy, Bob's an athlete and he had a smooth swing, but it took 4 or 5 shots to get over, and a bunch of us who were 20 years younger made it over in our first or second shot, but Bob was not going to be defeated. He made sure he got it over that water.
I'm not great at this kind of thing, so I hope you'll bear with me. I know Bob Reum was a remarkable businessman, but when I think of Bob Reum, I think of a remarkable family man. It just so happened that whenever I had the occasion to be with Bob, he was always surrounded by his family. And it was so clear to me that there was nothing in the world that made Bob happier than being in the presence of his family. So when I was with Bob and I look over at him, it always seemed to me that he was sort of taking in his family. It's sort of hard to describe, but if you know Bob, you'll know what I'm talking about. There was this sort of unique twinkle in his eye and this sort of contented look that he held in his face that sort of, if he wasn't actually smiling, you'd think he was. But what that all said to me, that look said, it said, I am the luckiest guy on planet Earth, and nothing makes me happier and prouder than being in the presence of my greatest accomplishment, my family, my wife, and my kids. I'll end by saying that I hope someday I will be the kind of father and husband Bob Reum was.